Good afternoon to one and all. So happy to be here with you. It's really an honor for me to interact with a vibrant group of academics and scholars, and of course researchers connected to the English department of Kuttanellur College, Achuthamenon Memorial Government College, Kuttanellur. I'm so grateful to the organizers, for the principal, head of the department, the coordinators, for inviting me to this awesome program. And I welcome again all the participants in this post-theory workshop today. And my session is actually an attempt. This is just an attempt to introduce a concept which is gradually getting momentum in contemporary context of the present day context of theory and practice, or the academic enterprise. This is not at all a coherent, which is not actually established as a comprehensive, coherent theory so far. But I just want to illustrate the fundamental theoretical premises of this theory with the help of some, 20th century thinkers. The whole tradition of Western metaphysics, taking something from here and there. But this is basically a very simple argument, which is intrinsically connected with our research, the research in our time, in a wide variety of emerging areas, such as transnational movements, movements of capital, the labor markets, the internet, the digital nativity, and so many other issues pertinent to our context. So this is a work in progress in some sense. This is an argument in the making in connection with existing theoretical practices in art and humanities, and not at all a full-fledged, robust system of thought or a system of alternatives. One of the major concerns of this work, the work itself, is its inability of arguments to be complete, comprehensive, and closed. See, when Samuel Beckett described James Joyce's work, Dubliners, as a work in progress, that was a great note of appreciation and a compliment without reluctance. But I'm quite sure that if I consider my work as a work in progress, you will never appreciate that in that sense. But let's approach it as a work in progress, a workshop piece to be more precise. It is a work, it's not actually a paper, a work in progress, in the process of shaping up, going through many phases of transformation, and not actually in my session alone, but in the case of all who are, all thinkers and theories I depend upon in this session. Okay, first of all, we need to, 1 second, I just need just 1 minute, please. I'm sorry for the break. Forgive me for the break. Let's begin with a very simple explanation of the etymology of the word theory, what we use in English. I have a purpose in doing that. We are all familiar with the late Latin word theoria, which implies mental scheme or conception, which originated from the Greek word theoria, means contemplation, speculation, viewing, looking at. If you remember the reference to theater, theatron, and the first word theo referring to spectacle, the process of view, the art of viewing, seeing, etc. So there is essentially and a component of spectacle, a component of looking, a component of viewing, etc., in the very process of theorizing. And until 16th century, theory was used as principles or methods of science or art. And in 17th century, that has become more focused and clear with a sort of definition, intelligible explanation based on observation and reasoning. Obviously, theoretical practices depends completely on objects, artifacts, which we look at. And to use a simple logic of Slavoj the position of the object, the parallax object, position of the object influences the position of the subject or which is looking on the object. This is precisely correct in the case of research, if you depend on the metaphor of research. There have been many attempts to initiate a decentering of the practices of theory in many disciplines, such as literature, arts, and humanities in the recent decades. My attempt is to cite some of such innovative attempts by looking at contemporary research, challenging of the challenges of disciplinarity and the questions of intersectionality. We have, for convenience sake, we can let's divide the whole session to three small sections, and after that we'll go on with a question, a Q&A session if possible. The first session is composed of the existing definitions, approaches, in search of alternative possibilities through a sort of a decentering of academic practices by investigating the current academic enterprise. The alternative as a collective, which is entitled as third in our title. Third does not stand for a singular, but it's a collective, multitude. I'll explain you at the end of this session how the third, unlike the first and the second, stands for a collective multitude. There's a third theory. This approach has no linkage with any predominant existing model with a title third so far. So in brief, this session is an immensely humble effort to look at the possibilities of a third position, the chances of adapting and understanding the trialectics and triads in currency, and obviously a third position which implies multiplicity, not a singular location, as I have already explained to you, location of address or position of address. Sometimes you might feel that I'm addressing research scholars alone, but I believe the position of a research scholar is not at all a privileged one, such a privileged one. And this is the age of amateurs exerting their role as research scholars and theorists, especially in humanities and social sciences. In a nutshell, The arguments here are applicable also for is for everyone who has a research instinct within them. Let's design, as I told you earlier, this whole session to 3. The first session attempts to explore the notion of third in theory, space, and in thought process. The notion of third by Karl Popper, third space by Homi Bhabha, the trialectics of Edward Said, etc. Edward Soja, etc. That will definitely come underway, but we are not selecting all of them, all critical references to the third, to elucidate our point. This approach is in contrast to others detailing the phenomenal works and its follows. We'll be trying to explicate the arguments through by selecting certain very important works in the last 2 or 3 centuries, and illustrate completely the point in the first session. The second session would throw some light upon the notion of the third by focusing on 2 key thinkers of 20th century, Jacques Lacan and Henri Lefebvre. But of course, I'm not elaborating their approaches because almost all of you are familiar with the theoretical premises of both these thinkers. But what I'm really in need of is 2 triads in Lefebvre and Lacan that will explicate promptly during our discussions. This is the examples taken from them, and their intrinsic connections with Hegel are all, all my attempts to explain the question, the challenge of the third in connection with a trialectic trialectic, which is pertinent in the works of both of these thinkers. The third section elaborates upon the philosophical formulation and interpretation behind the theory of third, which the source of the explanation for the concept of the third is not from very popular theoretical premises, but from some very interesting thinkers, contemporary thinkers. And we can develop this to initiating the possibilities of third in theory, position and practice, in theory, position and practice, by interrogating emerging areas of research and scholarship, which naturally would instill some interest in your studies and research in future. As per popular conception, the first, I just want to select my actual counters of discussion by delineating some of the components, some of the elements. As a popular conception, Homi Bhabha is the founding scholar of the metaphor of the third through in his essay, in that edited book, Identity, Community, etc. The notion of third space, initiated by Homi Bhabha, encountered serious criticisms for a number of reasons from the quarters of contemporary social sciences and humanities. which the third space essay by Homi Bhabha has become a phenomenal attempt in post-colonial theory in the end of last century. And there are many people who follow intrinsically the theoretical structure of that work. But definitely my third has absolutely no connection with Homi Bhabha's idea of the third space. Whenever I refer to third space, that is drawn from Edward Soja, not from Homi Bhabha, not to get confused with. Okay, the notion of third space initiated by Bhabha, that is widely criticized for a reason. The reason for criticism is that an absolute reductionism associated with his concept of the third space and his companion terms such as hybridity, liminality, and diversity, altogether within the purview of post-colonial theory. For Bhabha, liminality implies a positive expression of cultural hybridity without imposed hierarchy. I quote these two terms from the third space essay. I would like to reject Bhabha's third space in this discussion for its innate fragility related to the philosophical reductionism definitely in the antithesis to which the notion of third is developed in our discussion in this paper. Our prime argument stems from two spectacular expeditions on triads. The first, I just have taken a familiar thinker that's definitely Jacques Lacan and Slavoj Zizek's interpretation of Lacan's imaginary, symbolic, and the real triad. The first is the Lacanian triadic structure comprising imaginary, symbolic, and the real, which appeared predominantly in three different stages in Jacques Lacan's intellectual life. So, for example, imaginary appeared in the first 40-50 period, and symbolic loomed large in 50-60 period, and real has become the center of theoretical deliberations in the post-60 period in Lacan's intellectual life. This structure brings home the notion that the structure of human mind is triadic, according to Lacan, based on phenomenological and historical realities. So the thing is, it's not simply a triad, but the triadic structure has a philosophical and historic reason behind it. Once we acknowledge the Hegelian thing in Lacan, that idea will be elucidated once we acknowledge the Hegelian thing in Lacan. There are many interpreters of Lacan in connection with the triadic structure, pertinent in manifesting concepts in various cultural and intellectual traditions. Not only interpreters of Lacan, but philosophers and theorists. These interpreters of the triadic structures in various intellectual traditions, especially in our time. Okay. For example, the communication triad by theorists of communication, students of communication theory, which defines information, utterance, and understanding on the basis of a triadic structure. Okay, exactly how Lacan graphically represented the symbolic real and the imaginary symbolic and the real in his analysis of human psyche. Most of Lacanian, the followers of Lacan, the Laclos, school, and at the same time Slavoj Žižek and the post-Lacanian school have recognized the Hegelian influence. Especially, I'm referring to Žižek's works on Lacan's Hegelian influence on Lacan with the Hegelian thing, and a huge work on Hegelian influence on Lacan, written by Slavoj Žižek, etc. But in actuality, the Hegelian influence in French academia, especially the École Normande Supérieure, the University of Sorbonne, in the first part of the last century, was mainly through a Russian, Alexander Koyev, who was a major interpreter of Hegel at the beginning of last century. After his university research on Hegel, he came to Paris and conducted a series of workshops in the 30s. Alexander Koyev was the person who introduced Hegel's phenomenology of spirit to the Parisian academic world through a series of seminars in 1930s onwards. Hegel's philosophy of history was interpreted through the lens of materialism, Marxian materialism, and the temporalized ontology of Martin Heidegger. This deeply influenced the intellectual circles of Paris at that time, including Lacan, and the people such as Merleau-Ponty, Louis Althusser, Jean-Paul Sartre, and many others have participated at the École Normande Supérieure at the Sorbonne University, listening to Alexander Koyev's lectures on phenomenology of spirit. So the two questions of materialism, materiality and historicality brought into Lacan's thought through Alexander Koyev's interpretations of Hegel. So Koyev brought together the notion of universal historical process and synthesis in view of unity with the help of these philosophical frames. For Lacan, the central concepts such as desire, the other, and self, self-consciousness are to be interrogated in relation to the phenomenology of spirit. One small example is that when the English translators wanted to translate desire in Lacan to English, they were actually troubled between the Wunsch, the German Wunsch used by Freud, and the desire of Lacan. And ultimately, what happened was they have taken up the Berggruen, the German term used by Hegel to denote Lacan's desire. Desire is directly translated to French and to English as Berggruen. So that is the intrinsic sort of connection between Hegel and Lacan, especially in use of spectacular, phenomenal terms used in his work. So this sort of a structural, the interconnection between phenomenology of spirit by Hegel at a structural level has become instrumental in shaping up the structure of this work as triadic. Usually there is, people commit a small mistake regarding the dialectics of Hegel as thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Actually, Hegel is not a progenitor or exponent of this idea, which is actually imposed upon him. But Hegelian dialectic, is a networks of many triads inherent in his Phenomenology of Spirit and other major works, or especially on the work on history. Okay, interpreters of Hegel usually explores multiple triadic structures within Phenomenology of Spirit, the work. See, for example, mind as a notion of abstractions, negatives, and reinterpretations. This is one triad which is popularly exemplified by Hegelian scholars. Lacan formulated this one among many triadic structures in on feminine sexuality, the seminar 20. Of course, it has gone through numerous shifts and changes. He explicated the interdependence of the registers of imaginary, symbolic, and the real in terms of the Borromean note. Borromean note is actually a very interesting concept borrowed from Borromean family. When one note is broken, two other notes will be free. The register of imaginary evolved in somewhere 1930s and 40s, and connected to the spheres of consciousness and self-awareness. For instance, what one imagines as others imagine, he or she, perspectives of others, which to be imagined by others imagining about others, etc., which lead finally to fantasy, ego, and transference, and which the imaginary phase was at the beginning of early Lacanian phase was central to the concept of ego formation. Though initially blended with structuralist notions, symbolic order is associated with cultures, language as a very familiar concept, and society. In one of the early phases, the unconscious is manifested as networks of signifiers, that is signifying chain, that is unconscious structured like language, in an effort to link unconscious with language, and it's not unconscious structured like not language but unlanguage, that is unconscious structured like language. Not language like English, French, German, but as tongue to implies tongue to. The register of the real is extensively incomprehensible, impossible. It implies impossibility as reality. Okay, the real formulated in the later phase implicated convergence of positions and instability. Okay, so these are the basic premises of the Lacanian triad of imaginary, symbolic, and real. There are plenty of other issues such as the barred other or side of your sense, etc., within the triadic structure of imaginary, symbolic, and real. But the triadic structure itself is a phenomenal thing in our discussion in developing a third position. Okay, our mission is to establish the presence of triads in spectacular juncture of Lacanian psychoanalysis. The second important triad is the interpretation of Henry Lefebvre by Edward Soja in his phenomenal work, Third Space. Though Edward Soja explains third space as location of marginality, third space is location of marginality, post-colonial, marginality, post-coloniality, subalternity, etc., by referring to bell hooks, Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, and Homi J. Baba. This is, his fundamental framework to constitute, Edward Soya's fundamental, theoretical framework to constitute a third space is Henry Lefebvre's reduction of space and the inherent trialectics, a triad developed actually from Hegelian dialectics or trialectics. Okay, in relation to both Lacan, Lefebvre, and Soya, there is a path-breaking work on the triadic structure of mind. We'll explain Soya later after referring to two other important works in connection with the trialectics. Work on the triadic structure of mind, outlines of philosophical systems by Francisco Bellafoyer, and another work on contemporary politics by Anthony Judge. Judge is not a professional researcher, but an amateur scholar who combined his varied understandings of geometrical forms and structures in connection with history and transformations of social movements, and to introduce the notion of implicit cognitive cycles. Judge making use of Ron Atkin. Ron Atkins is a mathematician who specializes in vision mathematics. Ron Atkins' notion of three-dimensional man devised that reductionism is the worst danger to cognitive process. So the importance of fluidity is also interrogated on the basis of the critique of cognitive reductionism by Anthony Judge. Through the works of visual mathematics, specialists who specializes in fundamental mechanisms of thought and computer models, Anthony Judge has introduced a critique of a radical critique of cognitive reductionism. And let's first consider Edward Soya's interpretation of Lefebvre's trialectics in the context of social production of space and critical geography. It is considered, Edward Soya considered it as a long voyage, and this voyage he referred to the trialectic process of establishing a structure in terms of a thirding as othering. Of course, thirding can be seen as an othering, but I'm just referring to the process of thirding as an inevitable part of the practice of trialectics. For Lefebvre, again, reductionism in all forms, including Marxist versions, begin with the lure of binarism, the compacting of meaning into a closed either-or, opposition between two terms. Or elements. Whenever faced with such binarized categories, such as subject-object, mental material, natural social, bourgeoisie proletariat, local global, or center periphery, etc., Lefebvre persistently sought to crack them open by introducing another term, third possibility, or a moment that partakes of the original pairing, but it's not just a simple combination or an in-between position along some all-inclusive continuum. This critical thirding is the first and most important step in transforming the categorical and closed logic of either or to the dialectically open logic of both and also, etc. So thirding is central to the project of Henry Lefebvre. And when Lefebvre attempted to define his central thesis, the critique of the illusion of transparency and opacity lays the groundwork of the thematic trialectic. Soya coins the notion of trialectic in spite of dialectic in devising the three important phenomena of spatial, imagination. In production of space, the constituted dyad is spatial practices, which is actually perceived space, representations of space, which implies conceived space, and the third of the triad is spaces of representation, that is known as the lived spaces. See, the first, perceived space, spatial practices, is defined as producing a spatiality that embraces production and reproduction, and the particular locations and spatial sets. Where the second, conceived spaces, the representations of space, is a conceptualized space, again I quote, the space of scientists, planners, urbanists, technocrats, etc., as of a certain type of artist with a scientific bent, all of whom identity, what's lived and what's perceived with what is conceived. The last of the dyad, spaces of representation, it is both as distinct from other two spaces and as encompassing them, following his strategic use of social space in his preliminary thirding. Spaces of representation embody complex symbolisms, sometimes coded, sometimes not. They are linked to the clandestine or underground side of social life. So these are the explanations given by Lefebvre to elaborate upon his dyad, which ultimately leads to a trialectics of spatial imagination. So the trialectic thinking is an inevitable part of the understanding of third space, of the theory of third, as a limitless composition of life worlds that are radically, I quote, open and openly radicalizable, that are all-inclusive and transdisciplinary in scope of yet politically focused and susceptible to strategic choice, and that are never completely knowable, but whose knowledge nonetheless guides our search for emancipatory changes and freedom from domination. The trialectics of Henry Lefebvre, of say spatiality, from the triad of three spaces of perceived, conceived, and lived spaces. The trialectics formed includes spatiality, historicality, and sociality. Okay, which is summed up for the social production of space, time, and being in the world, in connection with space, time, and being in the world. Apply at all levels of knowledge formation, from ontology to epistemology, theory building, empirical analysis, etc., all sorts of enterprise of theory we are involved in. This is the second idea of trialectics from Edward Sawyer. Trialectics is traditionally treated as the third essential factor of logic, obviously significant in Hegel. This notion is inevitable in Hegel's dialectics and Aristotelian definition of formal logic. The notion of trialectics attempts to transcend both formal logic and dialectics, and dialectics, and all manifestations are possibly under the scrutiny of trialectics. Trialectics represents constant marcations, and there is an essential shifting between integration and disintegration, where we find out the possibility of trialectics, which we have seen earlier. Okay, so the third attempt is by, as I've already illustrated, Francisco Bellafoil. His work, The Outline Structure of Human Psyche, defines triadic structure of mind on the basis of rational activity, which is intellect, from which ideas shoot up. The second is emotional, which is the emotional section, which gives way for sensitiveness, which ultimately leads to sentiments, which is the part of desire in from Hegel and all post-Hegelian thinkers. The third is practical activity, which is under power of body structure, rituals, whatever, and which ultimately leads to actions. So this triadic structure is also similar to the other triads, which results in a sort of a trialectic approach to the universe. So these triad, all the nodes of these triad, rational activity, emotional activity, and practical activity, they are interdependent, without which other coordinates can't survive. So, for example, the trialectics designed out of these triads are the first based on idea, which comes out, idea works on a desire to get manifested. So that's sentiment. Idea is inspired by sentiments, which ultimately leads to action. The first of the trialectic. And the second is sentiment inspired by leads to action, which ultimately ends in idea, reaches in idea. And the third, action-centric, which gives way to idea, which ultimately reaches in sentiment, desire. Okay, so Francisco Bellafoil called this triplets, not trialects, but triplets. But after that, Francisco Bellafoil conducted a detailed analysis of the whole of Western metaphysics, especially from the times of Descartes, his idea of cogito, and to the contemporaries such as Derrida, Deleuze, Foucault, and others. Okay, so he was actually searching for, when he started research in Descartes' cogito, he was actually searching for the triadic structure other than cogito, self. He proposed a sort of triadic monism. In Western metaphysics, there are two traditions very potent even now. One is the monistic tradition, and the second is the dialectic. Francisco Bellafoy was proposing a sort of a triadic monism, which is pertinent to contemporary explorations on explorations in scholarship. And triadic monism served as the platform for comprehensive ontology. And it defines a large terrain of triadic imagination. And Francisco Bellafoy's, through a systemic deconstruction of Western systems of thought, he proposed triadic monism and the trialectic imagination. Okay, so like him, Anthony Judge, we have mentioned his name before. Anthony Judge, through the induction of polyhorns, that is, geometrical figures with plane faces, and other geometrical forms, and Makraba is a mysterious mythical figure, attempts to critique both the reduction of multiplicities and abstraction of transcendental illusion in idealism, especially in the world of German idealism and post-enlightenment rationalism. These two important phenomena proposed by Anthony Judge and Francisco Bellafoy. These principles implies the possibilities of triadic structures. For example, Anthony Judge has taken up plenty of mysterious structures taken from Celtic religions, early Christianity, etc. But I'm not referring to any of them. I'm not interested in such images taken from various intellectual traditions. But I just wanted to make it to be very precise to our time, our contemporary context of thought and philosophy. So this implies an overt fixation to the binaries, the illusion of idealism and the post-enlightenment rationalism are responsible, according to Francisco Bellafoy, are responsible for the overt fixation to binaries of body, soul, matter, spirit, text, interpretation, theory, practice, etc. So one of the major intentions of this session is to work beyond the system of binaries, which limits our thought process, especially in academic enterprise, and definitely that limits us our ability to comprehend multitudinal possibilities of alternatives. This is the first step to locate and define the significance of a theory of third. As I've insisted at the beginning, third is not only a singular position, as Baba observes. It is a collective of singularities. Sorry, it is not Baba, I'm mistaken. This is Deleuze observes. It is a collective singularities, singular positions, which operates in academic research without a transcendental agent, the dialectic principle. Okay, therefore, the transcendental agent is working within us to control the cognitive process to its binaries. And the concept of multitudes proposed by Deleuze and Guattari was severely criticized by David Harvey it's for its lack of organization. So many on the basis of its insistence on Lenin philosophy by Thrissur, etc. So I wish to connect with that notion of multitude, which implies fluidity and assemblage in as proposed by Deleuze and Guattari. All existing theoretical practices have a hidden edge of third, which is not actually absent, but it appears to be invisible, which is unexplored in our inquiries of features of objects, artifacts, and movements. The theory of the third, based on dialectics, opens up vistas of transdisciplinary approaches and methods beyond the reductionist practices of contemporary academic enterprise. Okay, so it's almost 1 hour. I would like to conclude my session